You're listening to the great voice of the Great Lakes and All Talk with Tom Jordan and Kevin Dietz on 760 WJR.
You know, we have seen an energy crisis before in this country. This is not the first time when supplies were at desperately low levels. Look back to 1977, President Carter years. We saw gas prices go sky high back then. It's funny, back in the 1970s, Carter was concerned about getting more solar energy involved, use less oil, and ask OPEC to produce more oil in their countries. Well, that's what Joe Biden is doing right now as president. Just, ask the Saudis to produce more oil is what he's trying to do. For some of us watching, Kevin, it seems maybe we need to incentivize more production here. That makes sense to a lot of us here in the United States. Produce more oil. We've slashed the number of U.S. rigs producing oil in this country by half over the past few years.
Yeah, Tom, the demand is outpacing the supply, so prices are up. What can be done to turn that around? Well, everybody could stop using gas, but if we did that, the economy would tank because people would stop traveling, people would stop going places, people would stop doing things. Is there a way to increase the supply? There is, but is the administration willing to do it? Joining us now is Jay Young, fourth generation oil and gas professional. Jay, welcome to All Talk.
Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for being on. First of all, if we wanted to, could we drastically boost supply, and how long would that take? Do we have enough resources to do that?
Yes and yes, but it would take time. And what I mean by that is it's like right now Exxon. Just take that for an example. Exxon makes $6 billion first quarter this year. Make $6 billion, and what would normally happen in a normal cycle of oil and gas, and I'm a fourth generation guy, I've been around it for a long time, and I talk about it in my book, The Upside of Oil and Gas Investing, that you can get on Amazon. But when you talk about cycles and Exxon, normally if Exxon's making $6 billion, they're putting that money back to work. They're increasing their rig count because at these prices, economics look favorable. And the board would say, oh, my goodness, if you drill a well, you're making 4 or 5 times your money in a short amount of time. Let's just go do it again. But instead, the rig count has stayed the same. With all the public companies, I don't say all of them, but the majority of the public companies in the United States, they've kept their rig count pretty solid or pretty straight. So what's happening is a lot of these companies aren't increasing their rig count. And if you're not increasing your rig count, you're not increasing your production. And if you're not increasing your production like it should, then there's a guy in the Tyler, Texas, an independent guy, one guy that runs the whole company, Newborn. He has more rigs running right now than Exxon, independent guy in the United States. And Exxon has millions of acres that they could drill. They're just not drilling. They're not drilling. They're not incentivized enough by either, their ESG people on their board or all the different things that go along with drilling, that they decide we're not going to continue drilling for oil and gas. We're just going to sit on the sidelines. And they're still drilling, but they're not increasing or ramping up their rig count, which is what they should be doing.
Is that
public companies?
Is part of that decision because of the executive orders that Joe Biden issued on day one? Is it because of the administration saying we want to go to renewable energy, we want to get away from fossil fuel, and the Exxon board is saying, wait a minute, if this is where the future is, we're not gonna take all these profits and throw them away by putting more by increasing our rig count if the future is renewable energy.
Exactly. And that's what they're saying. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. But instead of drilling for oil and gas, the people on the board or public companies are just saying, okay, we'll stay status quo. We'll give money back to investors. We're not going to increase it. And we're in for another 5 to 10 year. When you say peak demand, when is that peak demand going to hit? And people still say it's going to be 2030 before we see peak demand, which means that we're going to need to increase our oil, over the next 5 to 10 years to meet that peak demand, because any oil well decreases in production. They don't increase. They decrease. So when you put a well online, that well declines in production. And what happens is if we're putting less wells online, then you're not seeing an increase in our domestic production. And if you don't have that, like you said a minute ago, it's all about demand, supply. Demand's up, supply is down. We're having higher oil prices. And that's what's going to happen, I feel like, in the next 5 to 10 years, is you're going to see this demand start to surge and continue to go up. We don't have the supply because we're not drilling any new wells or as many new wells as we need to. So therefore, we're hurting ourselves because of our supply demand, and we're not when the price goes up. And people, I'm not 80%. I don't know the exact number, but 80%, 85% of the people out there, are living paycheck to paycheck. They need to consider, what am I going to do? What am I going to cut in my household because I've got to drive to work? I don't want to just stay at home all the time. I got to go and see my parents, or I got to go see, friends and family. They don't want to quit driving, so they're going to have to make some bad decisions or hard decisions on what they're going to do for a long period of time, because we're seeing prices up, and it's going to be here for a long time.
Well, it's funny because Joe Biden is now saying this is a priority for him to bring those prices down, and he wants oil companies to produce more, get more of those rigs that you're describing. They've said that he's made it incredibly difficult through things like ESG standards, banks pulling out as a result, so you have a lot less investment, very little capital. Fewer approved permits, those kinds of things. So the oil executives are saying what we need to see is policy that encourages responsible development of all types of energy sources. Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think policy is going to change enough to where at least in 5 years from now we might see some drop in the oil prices?
Yeah, it's all about the administration, right? I mean, under Trump, and I put it on my LinkedIn, Jay Young, King Operating LinkedIn, a video there of Ted Cruz talking about when you saw Drill Baby Drill back in the day when Trump was there, that you're seeing $2 gasoline at the pumps. And all of a sudden, obviously he's a Republican, he's going to bash the Democrats, but he's just saying, here's what happened when Biden took office. The day he took office, he shut down the Keystone Pipeline. Well, that wasn't good because we need oil in the United States. So he just goes over like 6 or 7 or 8 different reasons or things that the federal government hasn't, it's not favorable of or hurt us in the domestic production side. So therefore, oil prices are going to go up. And as long as the administration's in and we see the people that aren't supportive, that's what Trump was. I mean, if he was anything, he drove production. He knew that we needed oil and gas production in the United States, and man, he was all over it. Drill, baby, drill. I mean, that was his mantra, and was drill, baby, drill. Well, you're hearing Biden say, don't worry about it. You're hearing John Kerry say, hey, don't worry about it. Oil prices are going to go up, but they're going to come down in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah,
and
everybody's going to be okay. Yeah, you've heard the president, Joe Biden, say, actually, we're going to end fossil fuels. He was very explicit about that intent back on his campaign trail, and even as late as last year. Well, we appreciate, as always, you coming on. Jay Young is 4th-generation oil and gas professional. He's got a great book out there as well. Jay Young, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.